The story you are about to hear is not a legend, nor a pious exaggeration whispered through the centuries. It is a moment recorded in the official Jesuit letters of the 16th century, a moment so dramatic, so unexpected, and so charged with divine intervention that it shook an entire city. It happened in Malacca in 1551, when a respected Muslim imam publicly challenged Saint Francis Xavier in front of a crowd. His intention was simple: to humiliate the missionary, to expose Christianity as false and to prove the superiority of his own arguments before everyone watching. People gathered quickly, forming a circle around the two men, eager to witness a confrontation of faiths. But something happened, something that no one in that marketplace, neither Christian nor Muslim, could have predicted. As the imam raised his voice to attack Xavier, as he prepared to declare the priest a deceiver, his tongue froze, his jaw locked. No sound came out. He tried again. Nothing. His face twisted in panic. His hands trembled. The crowd murmured. And the man who had come to defeat Xavier now stood in total humiliating silence. What followed next would be remembered for generations, not as a display of power, but as a sign that God protects His truth in ways beyond human strength. Before we continue, take a moment to do something important for this mission. In the comments, tell us which city and country you are listening from, because these stories are uniting people around the world. And while you're there, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the true accounts of miracles, saints, and the hidden works of God that we uncover here. Now, let us return to Malacca, where a single moment of divine silence was about to change many lives. To understand what happened that day, you must imagine Malacca as it was in the mid-1500s, a port city where cultures collided like waves. Traders from India, Arabia, China, Japan, and Portugal walked the same streets. Muslims were the majority. Their teachers, the imams and qadis, commanded respect. Christianity was viewed with suspicion, sometimes even hostility. And into this world stepped Francis Xavier, a missionary with nothing but a crucifix, a worn cassock, and a heart burning for souls. He was known among the people as the holy man from the West, and even those who disagreed with his message recognized something unusual about him, a serenity that no argument could shatter. The imam who challenged him that day was not a nobody. He was a respected teacher of the Quran, a man admired for his eloquence and feared for his sharp tongue. He had grown frustrated by how many people, including some Muslims, were approaching Xavier asking to learn about the Christian faith. "I will silence him," he told his followers. "I will show that he knows nothing." His plan was simple: confront Xavier in public, shame him with clever arguments, and scatter his followers. The crowd that formed understood exactly what was at stake: pride, honor, authority, influence. Francis Xavier did not challenge him. He did not provoke him. He simply stood there, holding the crucifix that had traveled with him across half the world, from Lisbon to Goa, from Goa to Malacca. Witnesses said he looked peaceful, even gentle. When the imam approached, Xavier greeted him with a bow. "Speak," he said. "I will listen." Those words disarmed many in the crowd. They expected arrogance. They expected defensiveness. Instead, they found humility, the disarming humility of a saint. The imam began with confidence. His voice rang out across the marketplace. He accused Christianity of being corrupted. He mocked the idea of the incarnation. He ridiculed the crucifix Xavier held. And then, according to the Jesuit letters, Xavier did something that startled the bystanders. He did not answer. He did not defend himself. He simply raised the crucifix before his heart and prayed silently. No one could hear the words. No one knew what he said. But those who witnessed the event remembered the stillness that fell around him, as if the entire square had paused to listen. It was at that exact moment that the imam tried to speak again, but could not. His mouth opened, but no words emerged. His throat tightened. His tongue went stiff. He pressed his hand against his chest as though something were blocking his breath. His eyes widened with terror. People gasped. Some stepped backward. Others whispered that witchcraft was involved. But the Christians knew differently. They said later that it felt like the presence of God descended on the square, silencing arrogance without harming the man himself. The imam tried to continue. He gestured angrily, but nothing came out. Not one word. He became pale, then red, then pale again. The crowd watched in stunned disbelief. Some of his own followers tried to help him speak, shaking him, urging him, but his voice refused to return. He stared at Xavier as if begging for release. And Xavier, with the same calm he always carried, made the sign of the cross. Witnesses said the imam trembled at that gesture. At last, Xavier lowered the crucifix and whispered a short prayer. Almost instantly, the imam collapsed to his knees, not from worship, but from exhaustion and fear. His humiliation was complete, but Xavier did not triumph over him. Instead, the saint approached him gently. "Peace be with you," he said. "God desires your good, not your disgrace." Those words softened even the hearts of onlookers, who moments before had hoped to see Xavier defeated. When the imam finally recovered his voice hours later, he refused to speak about what he had experienced. But many in the crowd did. Some said it was the justice of God. Others said it was his mercy. And dozens came to Xavier afterward asking to be instructed in the Christian faith, not because they had seen a man silenced, but because they had witnessed a saint who responded to insult with humility, and whose God answered not with argument, but with power. To understand the weight of what happened that day, you have to know something about Francis Xavier's inner life. He was not a man who relied on miracles to convince people. In fact, in his letters, he repeatedly begged God not to use extraordinary signs unless absolutely necessary. He believed that faith born only from awe could be shallow. What he wanted, what he prayed for, was conversion born from sincere longing for truth. And yet, throughout his mission, miracles followed him like a shadow he never asked for. The event in Malacca was one of those moments. Xavier later wrote that he had felt a movement of charity toward the imam at the very instant the man's voice disappeared. He felt no anger, no desire for vindication, only compassion, as if God himself were telling him, "Let my power defend my truth." Word of the incident traveled quickly. By nightfall, the entire city was speaking about what had happened in the marketplace. Some Muslims were furious, accusing Xavier of sorcery. Others were afraid, whispering that perhaps the Christian God had shown his displeasure. But many, far more than the Portuguese missionaries expected, approached Xavier quietly in the days that followed, asking questions not out of curiosity, but out of a deep disturbance in their conscience. "Why did this happen?" they asked. "Why him? And why in front of everyone?" Xavier's response was always the same. God humbles the proud, not to destroy them, but to save them. It is important to understand that the imam was not an evil man. In the historical accounts, he is described as intelligent, passionate, and respected, but he carried a flaw that many spiritual leaders in every religion risk carrying: pride disguised as zeal. He wanted to defeat Xavier, not because he cared about truth, but because he feared losing influence. When pride drives a man's mission, even noble goals become corrupted. And God, in his mercy, sometimes breaks the instruments of pride so that the soul can see how fragile it truly is. Xavier understood this deeply. That was why he showed no triumph over the imam. He saw before him a soul in danger, not an enemy. Witnesses said that after the incident, the imam became strangely silent for many days. He avoided public gatherings. He stopped giving sermons. Some reported seeing him walk alone near the shoreline at dusk, looking troubled. He had been publicly humiliated, yes, but he had also been visited by something he could not explain. And that encounter left him exposed, vulnerable, and shaken. Xavier did not pursue him or pressure him. Instead, the saint prayed privately for his conversion, writing in one of his letters, "I ask God to bring him into his light through gentleness, not fear." Meanwhile, the marketplace incident sparked a wave of conversions, but not for the reason people imagined. Those who sought baptism were not impressed by Xavier's power. They were moved by his humility. They said they had expected him to boast or mock the imam after the miracle, but instead he rushed to comfort him. One fisherman who witnessed everything said, "If his God can give power without pride, then I want to know this God." That single sentence captures the heart of the gospel more than any theological argument ever could. The Portuguese authorities, however, reacted differently. They wanted to publicize the event, to use it as proof of Christianity's superiority over Islam. Some even suggested holding public debates to humiliate more imams. Xavier opposed them fiercely. He told them that the miracle was not a weapon, and that God allowed it to protect the truth, not to create division or pride. In a letter he wrote, Do not use God's works for your own triumphs. Where there is pride, God withdraws his hand. It is one of the clearest indications of Xavier's spiritual discernment. He would rather lose influence than let the miracle be exploited. Among the crowd that witnessed the event was a young Muslim scholar, barely 19 years old. He had admired the imam and had come prepared to support him. But when he saw the imam fall silent, a question pierced him so deeply that he later said it shook his entire understanding of God. If the Christian priest is wrong, why would God allow such a sign? That question tormented him for weeks. Eventually, he sought out Xavier privately. Their conversation changed the young man's life forever, not because Xavier won him with arguments, but because he listened to him with kindness. The young man would later become one of the saint's most devoted converts. Xavier knew that conversions sparked by miracles often fade if they are not rooted in authentic encounter. So after the incident, he intensified his catechesis. He visited homes, spoke with families, answered questions gently, and lived among the people with simplicity. He refused special treatment. He refused gifts. He slept on the floor, ate the same food they ate, and spent hours teaching children to make the sign of the cross. His life, more than the miracle, became the argument that convinced people of the truth of the gospel. But the imam himself remained the great mystery. Some expected him to retaliate. Others feared he would gather supporters to discredit Xavier. Yet, to everyone's surprise, he did nothing. He neither attacked nor defended. He withdrew from public life for weeks, and silently, without anyone noticing, the bitterness in his heart slowly softened. Something had been broken inside him, not by humiliation, but by the gentle way Xavier responded to his downfall. The saint's compassion had accomplished what arguments never could. The true breakthrough came one night when the imam sent a messenger to Xavier. It was long after sunset, when most of the city slept. The messenger arrived breathless at the Jesuit residence with a simple request. The imam wishes to speak to the priest, alone. Xavier rose immediately, took his crucifix, and followed the messenger through the silent streets. What happened in that nighttime encounter would mark the turning point of this entire story and reveal what God was truly doing behind the scenes. The imam waited for Xavier inside a small courtyard behind his home, a place normally reserved for quiet study. Lanterns flickered dimly against the walls. He dismissed everyone around him and asked that the gate be closed. When Xavier entered, he noticed immediately that the man who had once stood tall and confident now appeared diminished, not physically, but spiritually. Pride had been stripped from him. He motioned Xavier to sit. For a long time, neither spoke. At last, the imam broke the silence with a trembling confession. "Your God has humbled me, and I cannot deny it." His voice, once so sharp and commanding, was now soft and bare. "For days," he said, "my heart has been troubled. I did not come to speak of victory or defeat. I came to beg for understanding." And with those words, Xavier realized that the miracle in the marketplace had not been a punishment. It had been the beginning of a deep inner conversion. The imam then confessed the true reason he had challenged Xavier. It was not theological disagreement alone. It was envy. Envy that crowds gathered around the foreign priest. Envy that children loved him. Envy that even Muslims spoke of his kindness. "I feared," he admitted, "that your presence would weaken my influence." That admission cost him deeply. In the Islamic world of Malacca, public reputation was everything. But now, stripped of all defenses, he continued, "When I opened my mouth that day, something in me rebelled. It was as though a hand stopped my voice, not to disgrace me, but to show me that I was speaking from pride, not from truth." Xavier listened quietly, his heart moved not by triumph, but by profound compassion. What happened next is one of the most beautiful moments recorded in the Jesuit letters. The imam told Xavier that during the days following the miracle, he had felt an interior battle raging within him, fear, shame, confusion, but also something new, a strange interior warmth whenever he thought of Xavier praying in the marketplace. "When you lifted the crucifix," he said, "I felt as though a light entered me, even as I tried to oppose you." Xavier explained that this was not magic, not coercion, but grace, the gentle force of God entering a heart that still resisted him. The imam lowered his head and whispered, "I want to understand this grace. Teach me." Xavier did not begin with doctrines. He began with mercy. He told the man that God had allowed the silence not to humiliate him, but to rescue him from the prison of pride. The proud man, Xavier said, cannot hear God speak because he fills every space with his own voice. The imam nodded slowly. That sentence pierced him. For years he had spoken loudly, commanded respect, and dominated conversations. But when Xavier spoke of humility, something inside the imam broke, or perhaps finally opened. The imam asked about Christ, not about political power, not about theological superiority, but about the man himself. Why did God allow him to be humiliated? He asked. Xavier smiled gently. For the same reason he allowed you to be humbled. Love. And then Xavier spoke of the cross, of a God who lowers himself to raise others. He spoke of Christ forgiving his enemies while bleeding, praying for those who mocked him, offering mercy to those who betrayed him. As Xavier described Jesus, the imam's eyes filled with tears. He had never heard of a God who used power to serve rather than to dominate. This conversation continued late into the night. The imam asked about the incarnation, the sacraments, and why Christians believed that God desired intimacy with humanity, not distant submission, but relationship. Xavier answered each question with patience, drawing not from philosophical argument, but from the lived experience of walking with God. The imam said quietly, "I have taught the Quran all my life, yet something in me has always felt incomplete. Listening to you, I feel found." It was the closest he had come to admitting faith, but Xavier did not push him. The saint knew that grace must unfold freely. When the imam finally asked why he could not speak during the confrontation, Xavier gave an answer that startled him. Because God wished to speak instead. The imam froze. Those words struck him like a bell. "But why me?" he asked. Xavier responded with a truth he had learned again and again throughout his missions. "Because you are precious to him." The imam looked away, hiding tears. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not by men, but by God himself. The imam then made a request that Xavier would never forget. "Teach me how to pray as you pray." He did not ask for baptism. He did not ask for instruction. He asked simply for prayer, the first sign that his heart had begun to turn toward Christ. So Xavier taught him slowly, reverently, beginning with the sign of the cross. The imam struggled at first, tracing the gesture awkwardly, but Xavier guided his hand gently. "In the name of the Father," he whispered, "and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit." When the imam completed the gesture, he closed his eyes and whispered, "I feel peace." Before Xavier left that night, the imam admitted one last truth. "I no longer wish to oppose you." Xavier placed a hand over his heart and said, "God is already working in you. Follow the light he gives." They parted with mutual respect, something neither could have imagined days earlier. But this was only the beginning. God was not finished with the imam. Over the following weeks, the imam continued meeting with Xavier in secret. He asked questions not as a challenger, but as a seeker. He wrestled with fear of losing status, of being rejected by his community. Yet each time he prayed in the Christian way, he felt a deeper peace drawing him forward. Xavier remained patient. He never forced, never hurried. He simply walked with him, letting grace do its quiet work. And slowly, the imam's heart opened to a truth he had once tried to silence. As the imam continued meeting with Xavier, an interior war unfolded within him. On the one hand, he felt drawn irresistibly toward the peace Xavier carried, a peace he had never experienced in all his years of teaching. On the other hand, he feared the consequences. The religious authorities of Malacca did not tolerate any hint of sympathy toward Christianity. Conversion meant social death. It meant losing students, income, reputation, perhaps even family. And yet every time he prayed the sign of the cross, that same sense of divine warmth returned, softening his fears like wax in the sun. Xavier understood the struggle well. He had guided many souls through similar battles. He never pressured the imam. He simply remained present, steady, patient, a living witness of God's gentleness. One morning before dawn, the imam experienced something that finally pushed him beyond hesitation. He later told Xavier that he awoke suddenly, overwhelmed by the same silence he had felt in the marketplace. Not external silence, but an interior stillness that filled his entire being. He felt as though someone were calling him not with words, but with presence. The moment passed quickly, but it left an imprint deeper than any teaching or argument. He walked outside into the pre-dawn air and whispered, "God, if you are calling me, show me the way." It was the first time in his life he had prayed without reciting rehearsed formulas. It was the first time he had spoken to God as a father, rather than as a distant judge. That day the imam went to Xavier and told him everything. Xavier listened with shining eyes. He knew this was how God worked. Quietly, personally, without forcing, without humiliating. When the imam asked what he should do next, Xavier answered with a wisdom formed by years of mission work. "Walk slowly. Truth does not rush the heart. When the time is right, you will know." The imam nodded, grateful for Xavier's restraint. He had expected pressure, but Xavier offered freedom instead. But not everyone in Malacca shared that gentleness. Rumors had begun to spread. Some of the imam's students noticed his absence from public teaching. Others observed him visiting areas frequented by Portuguese Christians. Whispers grew, suspicion rose. A few of the city's religious leaders confronted him directly, demanding to know why he had not spoken publicly since the humiliation in the marketplace. The imam deflected their questions, but inside he felt torn. He feared betraying the truth growing in his heart, yet feared persecution even more. Xavier, sensing the danger, prayed intensely for him. Within days, tensions escalated. Some leaders insisted the imam publicly condemn Xavier to restore his honor. If he refused, they warned, he would lose his position. The imam felt cornered. For the first time, he understood the cost of conversion. Not physical harm, but the death of an old identity. That night he sought Xavier again, distraught. "What if I am too weak?" he asked. Xavier placed his crucifix gently into the imam's hands and said, "No one comes to Christ by strength, only by surrender." The imam wept. The following morning, the imam made his decision. He gathered his students and announced that he would no longer teach publicly. He refused to give a reason. His students were stunned, some angry, others confused. But the imam felt an overwhelming peace, the kind that comes only when a soul stops resisting grace. He walked away from the gathering without looking back, leaving behind the life he had built for decades. Xavier later called this moment his first true act of faith. Rumors reached the Portuguese authorities, who urged Xavier to baptize the imam immediately. They saw political advantage in such a conversion. Xavier refused. "Baptism is not a trophy," he told them. "It is a covenant." He would not allow the imam to be used as a weapon in religious rivalry. And indeed, Xavier's respect became the very thing that deepened the imam's trust. "Your restraint," the imam told him, "is the greatest sermon you have ever preached to me." Weeks later, after quiet preparation and much prayer, the imam approached Xavier and said, "I am ready." Xavier embraced him, overcome with gratitude. The man who had once challenged him in pride now stood before him humbled, transformed, and longing for Christ. The baptism, recorded discreetly in Jesuit letters, took place at night in a small chapel lit only by a single candle. As the water flowed over him, the imam whispered, "Jesus, lead me." It was the first time he had ever spoken the name of Christ with love. His conversion was kept hidden from the general public for safety, but news eventually reached small circles, not through rumor, but through the way he lived. He became a man of extraordinary humility. He served the poor quietly, helped Portuguese Christians translate local languages, and prayed with a devotion that inspired those around him. Xavier later wrote, "I saw in him what happens when God breaks a heart only to remake it in his image." The story of the Imam of Malacca is not about defeat, humiliation, or triumph. It is about the gentle, relentless pursuit of God, a God who silenced a man not to shame him but to save him, a God who used a miracle not as a weapon but as a whisper, a God who took a proud teacher and transformed him into a disciple. And Francis Xavier, he stood simply as a witness, a vessel through whom God revealed that grace does not always thunder. Sometimes it simply hushes a voice, opens a heart, and rewrites a destiny.